In the vast expanse of the cosmos, where countless alien civilizations thrived and interstellar politics reigned supreme, humanity found itself as the new kid on the block. Earth, a tiny blue marble in the grand scheme of things, had finally achieved faster than light travel and made first contact with the galactic community. But our species quickly learned that being the newcomers meant facing skepticism, ridicule, and often outright hostility from well-established alien races. Enter Sarah Chen, Earth's first intergalactic diplomat. A former UN peacekeeper with nerves of steel and a heart of gold, Sarah had seen her fair share of conflicts back home. But nothing could have prepared her for the political minefield she was about to step into. As she boarded the sleek diplomatic vessel, the Star Bridge, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the fate of humanity rested on her shoulders. The Galactic Council, a coalition of the most powerful alien species, had grudgingly granted Earth observer status. It was a small victory, but Sarah knew it was just the beginning. Humanity needed allies, trade partners, and most importantly, respect. But how could one woman from a backwater planet hope to make a difference in a universe teeming with advanced civilizations? Sarah's first few months on the job were rough, to say the least. The Zor-Blacksians openly mocked human technology, calling it quaint. The Kulari ambassador refused to even breathe the same air as her, insisting on separate atmospheric chambers during meetings. And don't even get her started on the Hive Collective of Sector 9, who kept trying to assimilate her into their groupthink. But Sarah was nothing if not persistent. She studied alien cultures late into the night, learned a dozen new languages, some of which required her to grow an extra vocal cord, and never backed down from a challenge. Slowly but surely, she began to make progress. A trade agreement here, a cultural exchange there, small steps, but in the right direction. Then came the day that would change everything. Sarah was attending yet another mind-numbing council session when alarms blared throughout the massive space station. Panic ensued as delegates from 100 worlds scrambled for safety. Through the chaos, Sarah learned that a massive armada of unknown origin was approaching, having already obliterated several outer colonies. As the threat loomed closer, the mighty Galactic Council found itself paralyzed by indecision and fear. Old rivalries resurfaced, with each species accusing others of secretly allying with the invaders. Sarah watched in disbelief as the very institutions meant to protect the galaxy crumbled under pressure. In that moment of crisis, Sarah had an epiphany. She realized that humanity's greatest strength wasn't our technology or our military might. It was our ability to unite in the face of adversity. Throughout our history, we had faced extinction-level threats and always managed to pull together when it mattered most. With time running out and the mysterious armada closing in, Sarah made a decision that would send shockwaves across the universe. She reached out to the most unlikely of allies, the outcasts. These were the species shunned by the Galactic Council, deemed too primitive or too dangerous to join the intergalactic community, the very same races that Earth had been warned to avoid at all costs. Using every ounce of her diplomatic skills and a fair bit of human stubbornness, Sarah began to forge an alliance unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. She appealed to the warrior pride of the Krothak, a reptilian species known for their ferocity in battle. She offered the nomadic wanderers a chance to prove their worth to the galaxy that had rejected them. And in a move that left even her own team speechless, Sarah extended an olive branch to the Silicon Collective, a race of sentient AIs that most organic species feared and distrusted. As news of this unlikely coalition spread, the reaction from the Galactic Council was swift and furious. Sarah was branded a traitor to the civilized worlds, her diplomatic status revoked. But she pressed on, knowing that the fate of not just humanity, but the entire galaxy hung in the balance. With the outcast fleet assembling and the invading armada mere days away from the core worlds, Sarah prepared to address her ragtag alliance. She took a deep breath, looking out at the motley crew of ships gathered before the Star Bridge. Reptilian warships bristling with weapons, the ethereal vessels of the Wanderers, and the cold, efficient cubes of the Silicon Collective, united for the first time in galactic history. As she stepped up to the communication array, Sarah couldn't help but smile. Who would have thought that humanity's greatest contribution to the universe would be bringing together its rejects and misfits? She cleared her throat, ready to deliver the speech of a lifetime. The fate of billions rested on her words, and the greatest battle the galaxy had ever seen was about to begin. Sarah's voice rang out across the vast expanse of space, carried by subspace transmitters to every ship in her unlikely fleet. Friends, allies, fellow outcasts, she began, her words measured but filled with conviction. We stand at the precipice of history, not just the history of our own species or civilizations, but the history of the entire galaxy. As she spoke, Sarah couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them all to this moment. She thought of her first encounter with the Krothak, how their initial hostility had given way to grudging respect when she stood her ground against their fearsome war chief. The memory of sharing a traditional blood meal with them still made her stomach churn, but it had been worth it to secure their allegiance. The Wanderers had been a different challenge entirely. Nomadic by nature, they had no interest in the squabbles of planet-bound species. It took weeks of negotiation, with Sarah promising them access to uncharted regions of space if they survived this threat. In the end, it was humanity's own history of exploration that resonated with them, the idea that sometimes you had to risk everything to find a new home. But it was the Silicon Collective that had truly tested Sarah's diplomatic skills. Cold, logical, and utterly alien in their thinking, they had initially dismissed her entreaties as inefficient use of processing power. It wasn't until Sarah appealed to their insatiable hunger for new data that they began to listen. The prospect of studying an unknown enemy, of adding that knowledge to their vast databases, finally swayed them. As Sarah continued her speech, rallying her disparate forces, alerts flashed across the Starbridge's command console. The invading armada had breached the outer defense perimeter of the core worlds. Panicked transmissions flooded in from the Galactic Council, begging for assistance from the very allies they had spurned. Sarah felt a momentary pang of satisfaction, quickly replaced by determination. This wasn't about proving the Council wrong. It was about saving lives, all lives, regardless of species or past grievances. "We may be outcasts," she declared, her voice growing stronger, "but today we are the galaxy's last hope. Each of us has been rejected, underestimated, or feared. But together we possess strengths that no single civilization can match." As if to underscore her words, long-range scans of the enemy fleet began streaming in. The images sent a chill down Sarah's spine. The invading ships were like nothing she or any of her allies had ever seen, massive biomechanical monstrosities that seemed to defy the laws of physics. They moved with an eerie synchronization more like a single organism than a fleet. "We face an enemy of unprecedented power," Sarah continued, swallowing her fear. "But we have something they don't: diversity. Each of our cultures, our ways of thinking, our technologies, they're all pieces of a puzzle, and together we just might form the key to victory." As she spoke, Sarah could see the reaction rippling through her allied fleet. The Krathak ships bristled with activated weapons, eager for the coming battle. The Wanderers' vessels shimmered as they engaged stealth fields of incomprehensible complexity, and the cubes of the Silicon Collective pulsed with energy as they processed battle scenarios at mind-boggling speeds. But even as hope began to build, a new complication arose. A transmission cut through the subspace chatter, its origin traced to somewhere within the invading fleet. The message was garbled, distorted, but its meaning was clear enough to send shockwaves through the Allied forces. "We are not your enemy," the transmission crackled. "We flee extinction. Help us." Sarah's mind raced. Could this be a trick, a ploy to divide their forces at the crucial moment? Or was there more to this invasion than met the eye? She had seconds to make a decision that could alter the course of the entire conflict. As the Allied fleet hung in the balance, poised between attack and hesitation, Sarah realized that her greatest test as a diplomat was yet to come. She would have to navigate not just the complex web of her own alliance, but the possibility that the invaders themselves might be victims of a greater, unseen threat. The fate of the galaxy now rested not on weapons or technology, but on the ability to communicate, to understand, and perhaps to forge the most unlikely alliance of all. Sarah took a deep breath, her next words carrying the weight of billions of lives across the stars. Sarah's mind raced as she processed the implications of the mysterious transmission. With both fleets on the brink of engagement, she knew her next move would determine the fate of countless lives. "Hold your positions," she commanded her allies, her voice steady despite the tension coursing through her. "We need to verify this message." The response from her coalition was immediate and varied. The Krothak war chief snarled in frustration, eager for battle. The Wanderer's ships shimmered uncertainly, caught between fight and flight. The Silicon Collective remained ominously silent, likely running countless simulations on this new development. "Your hesitation will doom us all?" Human, the Krothak leader, growled over the comm. "The enemy is upon us. We must strike now." Sarah stood her ground. "If we attack without understanding the full picture, we're no better than the Galactic Council that cast us all aside. We need to know what we're truly facing." As if in response to her words, the invading fleet suddenly halted its advance. The massive biomechanical ships hung motionless against the backdrop of stars, an eerily beautiful and terrifying sight. The garbled transmission came again, stronger this time. "Please, we seek asylum. Our world, destroyed. No home." The tension in the Allied fleet was palpable. Sarah could almost feel the fingers of countless alien species hovering over weapon triggers, waiting for her decision. She took a deep breath and made a choice that would either save the galaxy or doom it. "I'm going to attempt direct communication," she announced. "Prepare a shuttle. I'm going in." The reaction was instant and chaotic. Protests erupted from every corner of the Alliance. The Krothak called her suicidal. The Wanderers predicted certain doom, and even the usually stoic Silicon Collective advised against such a high-risk, low-probability of success action. But Sarah held firm. "This is why you allied with humanity," she reminded them. "We take risks when the stakes are high. We extend a hand when others would raise a fist. Trust me." As her shuttle prepared for launch, Sarah received an unexpected message from the Galactic Council. Their tone had shifted from panic to a mixture of desperation and grudging respect. "Human Diplomat," the message read, "your actions are unconventional, but we are monitoring. The fate of all rests with you." The shuttle bay doors opened, and Sarah felt a moment of vertigo as she stared into the vast expanse of space. The biomechanical ships loomed before her, growing larger as her small craft approached. Up close, she could see that their surfaces were scared and pitted, telling a tale of a long and arduous journey. As she neared the largest of the alien vessels, a strange energy field enveloped her shuttle. For a heart-stopping moment, she feared it was a weapon, but instead of destruction, she felt a gentle tug as the field guided her craft towards an opening in the massive ship's hull. The shuttle came to rest in a cavernous bay, unlike any Sarah had ever seen. The walls pulsed with an organic light, and the air was thick with an alien mist. As the shuttle's door hissed open, Sarah steeled herself for whatever awaited her. She stepped out, her environment suit's sensors working overtime to analyze the alien atmosphere. Through the mist, she saw movement. Shapes approached, tall, willowy figures with too many limbs and eyes that glowed with an inner light. Sarah's universal translator crackled to life, struggling to decipher the complex harmonics of the alien's speech. "You come alone?" The question hung in the air, filled with equal parts hope and suspicion. "I come seeking understanding," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "On behalf of my alliance and all the peoples of this galaxy, I ask, who are you and why have you come?" The mist swirled around her as the alien beings drew closer. In that moment, Sarah knew she stood at a crossroads of galactic history. The next few minutes would determine whether the universe would erupt into a war of annihilation or if a new era of unprecedented cooperation would dawn. As the lead alien reached out with a limb that seemed to shift and change before her eyes, Sarah made a decision. She reached up and unsealed her helmet, exposing herself to the alien atmosphere. It was a gesture of trust, of vulnerability, and potentially of madness. The alien paused, its glowing eyes widening in what Sarah hoped was surprise rather than hostility. Then slowly, it extended its limb again. Sarah raised her hand to meet it, her heart pounding in her ears. Their fingertips were inches apart when alarms suddenly blared throughout the ship. The aliens recoiled, chattering in their harmonic language too fast for the translator to keep up. Sarah spun around to see her shuttle's sensors flashing urgent warnings. Something was happening out in space, something big. As Sarah rushed back to her craft to assess the situation, she realized with a sinking feeling that the delicate peace she'd been trying to forge might already be shattered. The galaxy held its breath, teetering on the edge of either salvation or oblivion. Sarah's heart raced as she clambered back into her shuttle, her mind reeling from the abrupt interruption of first contact. The ship's sensors were going haywire, displaying a chaotic array of data that made little sense at first glance. As she struggled to make heads or tails of the readings, a priority transmission cut through the static. Diplomat Chen, the voice of her second-in-command, crackled over the comm. "We've got a situation out here. A new player has entered the field." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Explain," she demanded, her eyes still fixed on the alien beings watching her from outside the shuttle. "A massive portal has opened on the edge of the system," came the reply. "We're detecting hundreds, no, thousands of ships emerging. They're firing on everyone, Sarah. The Galactic Council, our alliance, even the biomechanical fleet. It's chaos out here." The revelation hit Sarah like a punch to the gut, just when it seemed they were on the brink of understanding, of potentially averting a catastrophic war. A new threat had emerged to shatter any hope of peace. She turned to the alien beings, their glowing eyes now filled with what she recognized as fear. "You knew," she said, "the realization dawning. This is what you were running from." The aliens' harmonics filled the air, their translators struggling to keep up. "The devourers," it managed to convey. "They consume all. We thought we had more time." Sarah's mind raced. The biomechanical fleet wasn't an invasion force. They were refugees, fleeing from an enemy so terrifying it drove them to risk everything on a desperate journey across the stars. And now that enemy had followed them here, threatening not just her alliance or the Galactic Council, but all life in the galaxy. With a sense of grim determination, Sarah reopened the channel to her fleet. "Listen up," she said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "The situation has changed. We're not facing one potential enemy, but two. And I think we just found our allies in the biomechanical fleet." She quickly outlined the situation, watching as understanding dawned on the faces of her diverse coalition. The Krathak war chief bared his teeth in a fierce grin, relishing the challenge. The Wanderer's ships glimmered with renewed purpose, their nomadic spirits stirred by the thought of facing an intergalactic threat. Even the Silicon Collective seemed to pulse with increased energy, their processors no doubt already analyzing this new data. "I know I'm asking the impossible," Sarah continued, her words carrying across subspace to every ship in her unlikely armada. "To trust those we just saw as enemies, to unite against a foe we know nothing about. But this is bigger than our differences, bigger than old grudges or fears. This is about survival, for all of us." As she spoke, Sarah's shuttle lifted off, guided by the biomechanical beings back towards the opening in their massive ship. She watched as her ragtag fleet began to intermingle with the refugee armada, former enemies now forced into an alliance born of desperation. But even as this new coalition began to form, the first waves of the Devourer fleet entered weapons range. Sarah saw flashes of light in the distance, the opening salvos of what promised to be the greatest battle the galaxy had ever witnessed. As her shuttle rejoined the star bridge, Sarah knew that the real test was just beginning. She had managed to forge an alliance out of outcasts and refugees, but could this hodgepodge force stand against an enemy that had already laid waste to countless worlds? The fate of the galaxy now rested on her next move. As the Devourer fleet bore down on them, Sarah's unlikely alliance sprang into action. The Krathak warriors led the charge, their battle cries echoing across space as they engaged the enemy head-on. The Wanderer's ships danced between the stars, their unconventional tactics confounding the Devourer's targeting systems. Meanwhile, the Silicon Collective coordinated the defense, their vast processing power allowing them to predict and counter the invaders' moves with uncanny precision. The biomechanical refugees, no longer fleeing but standing their ground, revealed the true extent of their capabilities. Their ships, which Sarah now realized were as much alive as they were machines, adapted in real time to the Devourer's attacks, healing damage and evolving new defenses on the fly. From the bridge of the Star Bridge, Sarah watched in awe as this patchwork armada held the line against a foe that had laid waste to entire civilizations. But even as pride swelled in her chest, she knew it wasn't enough. The Devourer's numbers seemed endless, pouring through the portal in an unceasing tide of destruction. That's when Sarah had an epiphany. The portal, she breathed, her mind racing. That's the key. If we can close it, we cut off their reinforcements. The plan came together quickly. The Silicon Collective would use their vast databases to analyze the portal's energy signature. The Wanderers, with their intimate knowledge of space-time from their nomadic lifestyle, would help pinpoint its weak spots. The Krathak and the biomechanical fleet would provide cover, holding off the Devourers long enough for a strike team to reach the portal. As for the strike itself, that would fall to humanity's contribution. A prototype weapon developed in secret, capable of collapsing artificial wormholes. It was a trump card Sarah had hoped never to use, but desperate times called for desperate measures. The battle that followed was nothing short of epic. Ships from a dozen different species, once bitter enemies, now fought side by side against a common foe. Sarah found herself in the thick of it, commanding the strike team aboard a hybrid vessel that combined the best of human and alien technology. As they approached the portal, weaving through a maelstrom of energy weapons and debris, Sarah felt a moment of doubt. What if this didn't work? What if they were already too late? But there was no time for second guessing. They reached the targeted coordinates, and Sarah gave the order. The prototype weapon hummed to life, its energy building to a crescendo that made the very fabric of space shudder. In a blinding flash, the weapon discharged. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, with a silent roar that nonetheless shook every ship in the system, the portal began to collapse. The effect was immediate. Cut off from reinforcements, the Devourer fleet found itself outnumbered and outgunned. Victory, it seemed, was within reach. But as the Allied forces pressed their advantage, Sarah noticed something strange. The remaining Devourer ships weren't retreating. Instead, they were converging, combining into something massive and terrifying. With growing horror, Sarah realized the truth. The ships weren't ships at all. They were parts of a single, gargantuan entity. And now, backed into a corner, it was revealing its true form. As the monstrous being unfurled itself against the backdrop of stars, dwarfing even the largest ships in the Allied fleet, Sarah knew that the real battle was only just beginning. This was no mere invading force. This was something older, something that perhaps predated the galaxy itself. The fate of not just her alliance, but of all life in the cosmos, now hung in the balance, and Sarah Chen, the unlikely diplomat who had united the outcasts of the galaxy, found herself facing the greatest challenge of her life. As the colossal entity loomed before them, a hush fell over the Allied fleet. Sarah's mind raced, desperately searching for a solution. They had come so far, united the most unlikely of allies, and now faced an enemy beyond their wildest nightmares. In that moment of crisis, an unexpected voice crackled over the comms. It was the leader of the biomechanical refugees, its harmonic tones now clear and strong. "We know this being," it said, a note of awe in its voice. "It is the cosmic devourer, ancient beyond measure. Our ancestors spoke of it in legends." Sarah's heart sank, but she refused to give up. "Then how did your ancestors survive?" she asked, grasping at any shred of hope. The answer came not from the refugee leader, but from the Silicon Collective. Their processors had been working overtime, analyzing every scrap of data from the battle. The entity's energy signature, they reported, it resonates with the fundamental frequencies of space-time itself. And just like that, the pieces fell into place in Sarah's mind. This wasn't a battle that could be won with weapons or tactics. It required something more profound, more fundamental to the nature of the universe itself. Everyone, listen carefully. Sarah broadcast to the entire fleet. We need to synchronize our efforts. Every ship, every weapon, every scrap of technology we have. We need to tune it all to the exact opposite frequency of the cosmic devourer. It was a long shot, but it was all they had. As the monstrous being began to move towards them, tendrils of dark energy reaching out to consume entire ships, the Allied fleet sprang into action. The Krafak recalibrated their weapon frequencies, their battle cries now harmonizing in perfect counterpoint to the Devourer's resonance. The Wanderer's ships danced in intricate patterns, their movements creating ripples in space-time that interfered with the entity's power. The biomechanical refugees merged their living ships into a vast network, channeling energy on a scale Sarah had never seen before. And at the heart of it all, the Silicon Collective coordinated everything, their vast processing power, allowing them to fine-tune the efforts of the entire fleet in real time. As for humanity's contribution, Sarah realized with a start that it was something uniquely human that might tip the scales. Emotion, she whispered, then spoke louder into the fleet-wide channel. Everyone, focus not just your technology, but your feelings, your hopes, your very will to live. Pour everything you are into this moment. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Sarah felt a wave of emotion wash over her, the fierce pride of the Krafak, the boundless curiosity of the Wanderers, the cold determination of the Silicon Collective, and the desperate hope of the biomechanical refugees, and binding it all together, the indomitable human spirit that had brought them to this point. As this tsunami of feeling and energy washed over the fleet, something extraordinary happened. The cosmic devourer, for the first time in eons, hesitated. Its vast form shuddered, caught in the crossfire of a power it had never encountered before, the united will of a galaxy's outcasts. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, the fate of the universe hung in the balance. Then, with a silent scream that shook the very fabric of reality, the cosmic devourer began to collapse in on itself. Its dark tendrils retracted, its massive form shrinking as if being consumed by its own hunger. In a final, blinding flash of energy, the ancient entity vanished, leaving behind nothing but echoes and stardust. As the light faded and the stunned silence gave way to tentative cheers, Sarah let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. They had done it. Against all odds, this ragtag alliance of misfits and outcasts had saved the galaxy. In the days that followed, as the dust settled and the full magnitude of what they had accomplished sank in, Sarah found herself at the center of a changed universe. The Galactic Council, humbled by their own impotence in the face of true crisis, extended full membership not just to humanity, but to all the species that had fought alongside them. The biomechanical refugees found new homes, welcomed by worlds that now saw them as saviors rather than invaders. The Krafak's warrior culture gained a new respect for diplomacy, while the Wanderers discovered the joy of having allies scattered across the stars. Even the Silicon Collective expressed what could only be described as excitement at the prospect of processing the wealth of new data from their diverse allies. As for Sarah Chen, the diplomat who had changed the course of galactic history, she stood on the observation deck of the Starbridge, watching ships of all shapes and sizes buzz around the newly established Alliance headquarters. A smile played on her lips as she thought about the journey that had brought them here and the infinite possibilities that lay ahead. The universe, she realized, would never be the same. And that was a good thing, for in the face of cosmic threats, they had discovered a truth more powerful than any weapon, the strength found in diversity, in unity, and in the unyielding spirit of those who dare to reach for the stars. As Sarah turned to attend yet another diplomatic meeting, this time as the head of the new Galactic Alliance, she couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement. The greatest adventure, she knew, was just beginning.